More than 1 billion dolls sold. A plastic icon that for decades helped define what meant to be a woman. But the soul of this phenomenon is not found in the accessories, nor in the famous dream house. It lives in something more subtle, and chemically speaking, far more decisive: the hair. From the inaugural ponytail of 1959 to the hypnotic volume of the bubble cut, from the California waves of the 70s to the neon shine of the 80s, each hairstyle is more than just fashion. It's a precise snapshot of its time. To revisit the history of Barbie's hair is to take a deep dive into the relationship between consumption and mass production. It reveals how fashion, technology, and at times sheer greed intertwine to build the identity of this global myth strand by strand. And it is this story that we begin to tell now on Behind the History. Barbie didn't just debut, she defined an icon. Her look was a manifesto: striped swimsuit, red lips, and above all, the blonde ponytail, high and shine. A hairstyle popularized by actresses like Brigitte Bardot. For millions of girls, that hair was not just an accessory, it was a symbolic rite, the passage from childhood braids to the teenage ponytail. Barbie, presented as a teenage fashion model, reflected the desire to grow up and occupy the adult world. It wasn't just aesthetics, it was marketing strategy. The hairstyle consolidated her image as a high fashion teenage model. But the true genius was the interaction. The hair was designed to be brushed, styled, and transformed. This playability turned a detail into a market differentiator. Each child could mold it all to their own image and thereby ensure that Barbie evolved with every change of style, remaining current in every new era. The first editions, numbers 1 through 3, used a surprisingly soft fiber. It is believed to have been mohair, Angora goat hair, which gave the ponytail a delicate texture. But durability was a priority. By 1960, with Barbie number 4, Mattel made a decisive change. It adopted Saran, a synthetic vinyl fiber imported from Japan. Saran became the standard. It was chosen for its resilience and its ability to reproduce the natural shine of human hair. The bet proved correct. The fiber was so robust that many of these vintage dolls have survived to this day, displaying their hairstyle in a remarkable state of preservation. The immortality of the fiber guaranteed the longevity of the icon. The 60s. The decade didn't ask for permission, it demanded rupture. The rigid elegance of the post war era, synonymous with stability, had become obsolete. A youth with purchasing power and a political voice, marked by civil rights movements and protests against the Vietnam War, craved freedom and their own identity. Fashion was their uniform: miniskirts, vibrant colors, unisex clothes, symbols of a generation that rejected their parents' formalism. In this context, Barbie also needed to change. Hair was no longer an adornment, but a statement. In 1961, the answers came from Paris. Alexandre de Paris, the hairstylist of haute couture runways, popularized the bubble cut. Mattel turned the trend into a product. The ponytail was cut. In its place, a short, rounded, and voluminous cut was born, which precisely translated the bouffant and beehive hairstyles of the Paris. With this, Barbie wasn't just following fashion. The hair became her crown, fixing her at the center of the global vanguard of style. The bubble cut functioned as a chameleon, varying in height, color, and makeup, allowing the doll to evoke a movie star or even resemble someone in the family. The hairstyle was a blank canvas ready for the projection of imagination. Alexandre de Paris' influence went beyond the runways. In the early 60s, he helped redefine the status of the wig. What was once seen as disguise or medical necessity transformed into a fashion accessory. Mass sold in department stores, wigs began to be used without embarrassment. Changing hairstyle or color ceased to be expensive and socially condemned privilege. Suddenly, transformation was democratized. With affordable wigs and drugstore dyes, a woman could reinvent her capillary identity with the same naturalness with which she changed clothes. Hair became the most powerful symbol of personal change, and Barbie became the natural showcase for this hair revolution. In 1963, Mattel released the Fashion Queen Barbie. The name was a title and also a promise. She was the queen of fashion, capable of reinventing herself with every hair change. Her body came in a gold strapless swimsuit. But the center of innovation was the molded head, painted with short strands and accompanied by three distinct wigs: a blonde bubble cut, a brunette page boy, and a red headband. The kit democratized transformation. In seconds, the doll could radically change her identity. The fashion queen proved that the power to reinvent oneself was no longer in an exclusive salon, but in the hands of any child. The enthusiasm for wigs was not limited to the fashion queen. In the same period, Mattel presented the Barbie teenage fashion model wig wardrobe set. The set was simple, but ingenious. It didn't bring the complete doll, just the molded head, designed to receive wigs of different colors and styles. In practice, it functioned as a miniature hairdresser's bust. For the first time, a child could practice hairstyles, switch looks, and experiment without limits. Barbie ceased to be just a fashion model to become a true laboratory of personal style. In 1964, Miss Barbie introduced the most revolutionary feature of the decade: bendable legs. For the first time, the doll could sit and flex naturally, approaching the realism the public expected. The innovation didn't stop there. The eyes that opened and closed added a new layer of verisimilitude. Barbie was no longer just static. She gained movement, expression, and presence. In parallel, Mattel deepened the logic of wigs. The idea was clear: to build a hair consciousness. Hair came to be understood as fluid, mutable, and above all, an essential part of identity in constant transformation. February 1965 marked a decisive turning point. The Barbie Look campaign introduced the public to a new style: the American Girl cut. Straight, blunt, and sophisticated, it was the same look worn by icons like Barbra Streisand and Liza Minnelli. But its life was short. The elegant bob of a single late, limited play, and soon proved incompatible with the speed of cultural trends in the mid-60s, when youth fashion and mod style began to dominate. The true innovation would merge in on another scale, allowing every child to become their doll's own stylist, changing hair color with a simple gesture. Barbie's hair revolution was about to become scientific. Mattel began to explore soluble pigments applied to synthetic fibers, and the result was Barbie Color Magic. Along with the Color Magic Barbie, Mattel launched the Color and Curve sets. It was not just a doll, it was a miniature laboratory. The child assumed the role of hair chemist, capable of tearing Barbie's color and style in seconds. The instant transformation turned the act of playing into experimentation, a new frontier in the interaction between product, fashion, and science. With a transparent, non-corrosive solution, children could alter the doll's hair color and, crucially, restore the original shade with the same ease. It wasn't just a magic trick, but the promise of reversibility. The transformation could be radical but never definitive. For the first time, Barbie offered total mastery over her identity, without risk of error. At the end of the 60s, American rock showed signs of wear. The answer came from England, the so-called British invasion, led by bands like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. Not only revitalized the genre, but transformed it into a global phenomenon. Youth began to dictate the direction of culture. Barbie absorbed this energy. In 1967, she left behind the rigid glamour of the post-war era and was reborn as Twist and Turn. The face was redesigned to convey youth. Eyelashes were implanted, and the hair, long, loose, and straight, symbolized freedom in its purest form. The doll was no longer just an elegant model, she became a reflection of the rebellion and vitality that London exported to the world. In the 70s, youth culture was dominated by a new wave, the counterculture. The hip movement clamored for individual freedom and a more natural lifestyle. California, with its sun and beaches, becomes the symbol of this new American dream. The look demanded lightness. The long, loose hair, naturally illuminated by the sun, and tanned skin. Naturalness was the new ostentation. All this created the perfect ground for the arrival of Malibu Barbie in 1971. She marked the definitive break from the structured hairstyles of the 60s. Malibu didn't bring a cut, she brought an attitude. Her hair was super long, straight, and blonde, capturing the sunny and uncomplicated spirit of the new California youth. She was the sun in doll form, the icon of naturalness and West Coast style. The use of saran was more than a fiber choice, it was a functional necessity. The material was crucial because it didn't tangle easily, which was essential for play, involving water or sand. Saran ensured that Barbie maintained her elegance. No matter how wild the play was, resilience was in the fiber. In 1973, Barbie Quick Curl wasn't just a new model. It was a material breakthrough. Mattel thought to make the hair more interactive and stable, eliminating the need for rich or complex accessories. The innovation was in the engineering of the fiber. Microstrands of twisted nylon were interwoven with saran. This composition allowed children to model curls and wind the hair easily, using only a brush. The introduction of nylon in production was not accidental, it was a strategic decision. Until then, saran dominated the market for its water resistance. But there was a problem. It couldn't hold firm coats for long. Nylon emerged as an alternative. It offered a smooth, malleable texture and, above all, the ability to hold shape when molded. It was a silent change, but with clear implications for the industry, defining both aesthetic and functional standards. Nylon seemed at first glance the definitive answer to technical challenges, but fashion was volatile, and the toy industry does not exist in isolation from it. Shortly after, beauty standards would change, and what seemed like a stable solution would soon lose ground. The demand for defined curls proved fleeting. Soon, the rise of the disco era would alter the beauty ideal. Rigid waves were no longer thought, but rather voluminous hair with intense shine. In this new cultural scenario, saran, previously seen as limited, found its function. Its ability to remain straight, maintain volume, and reflect light corresponded exactly to the aesthetic Mattel needed to project. The doll underwent a decisive transformation. A new facial mold, now smiling, was introduced, so striking that it remains in use in various versions to this day. The hair reflected the high of the era's glamour, inspired by the voluminous curls of Farrah Fawcett. It was a look designed to capture the aesthetics of discotheques, locks made to shine under the intense light of the dance floor. To achieve the extravagant volume required by the new standard, Mattel increased the density of the saran routing. The material proved perfect for the proposed, abundant, low cost, and above all, suited for the large loose curls that defined the superstar style. This choice consolidated an image that would become iconic, the glamorous blonde with big hair. A beauty ideal that not only reflected its time but dominated the aesthetic of the following decades. The launch of the first Black Barbie in 1980 marked a turning point in the history of Mattel. For the first time, The doll wasn't presented as a friend of the protagonist, as happened with Christie in the late 60s. She carried the name Barbie herself and brought a central black representation to the line. Although non-Caucasian characters had appeared before, the novelty was in the symbolism and the visual. If the 1977 Superstar Christie reflected the glamorous standard of long, voluminous hair, the 1980 Black Barbie inaugurated another reference. More than an aesthetic choice, it was a cultural milestone. For the first time, the notion of beauty hair began to recognize and legitimize Afro styles within one of the most influential toys in the world. In 1981, Barbie Golden Ring inaugurated an innovation that reflected the decade's spirit of ostentation. She was the first to receive metallic threads, known as tinsel, woven into her hair. The luminous effect translated in miniature, the luxury and exaggeration beginning to mark the 80s. A few years later, in 1986, the Barbie and the Rockers line took the logic to the extreme. Inspired by the pop culture, it explored excess, vibrant colors, and maximalism of the rockstar universe. To sustain this look, Mattel needed new solutions. The most significant was the large-scale adoption of nylon. Until the mid-80s, Saran dominated. But the new aesthetic ideal with neon colors and voluminous styles exposed its limitations. Saran lacked the vibrancy needed to keep up with the rock aesthetic. Nylon emerged as the alternative. Already present in other toy lines like My Little Pony, offered thicker filaments, intense shine, and crucially, the ability to absorb electric dye tones. It was the fiber capable of translating the chromatic and visual exaggeration that defined the decade. Nylon brought a crucial advantage. It allowed for bold, firm hairstyles like spiket bangs that held up without collapsing. It was with Barbie and the Hawkers that this fiber began to be used on a large scale. The look of these dolls reflected the more is more principle of 80s fashion. Neon contrasting streaks and exaggerated volume became the collection's signature. In 1992, Totally Hair Barbie established a new milestone. Her hair was the main protagonist, making her the best-selling doll in history, with over 10 million units sold worldwide. The concept tapped into the 90s obsession with long, styled hair. The doll came with gel and accessories encouraging do-it-yourself styling and allowing children to create personalized hairstyles. To make mass production feasible, Mattel turned to a specific fiber, Kanekalon. With it, it was possible to offer extra long, voluminous hair and, at the same time, reduce costs. The decision had already been made in the late 80s, when the company adopted the fiber in mass for almost the entire play line. The result was almost absolute standardization. About 98% of barbs released in the 90s used this fiber. Kanekalon is an acrylic fiber much cheaper and easier to mass produce than Saran, which was the previous standard. Kanekalon has thicker and more voluminous strands. This allowed Mattel to offer the abundance of hair needed for Totally Hair without compromising profit. The massive adoption of this new fiber, although essential for the commercial success of Totally Hair and to enable the extraordinary length of its strands, brought consequences perceived quickly by collectors. The fiber, soft at first thought, revealed fragilities over time. It tended to dry out and become rough and excessively voluminous after repeated handling. Compared to classic Saran, more stable and durable, Kanekalon presented inferior performance. Detangling the strands was a difficult task, and, not infrequently, this challenge resulted in a common destiny for many Barbies in the 90s. Haircut by children themselves, who, faced with persistent knots, resorted to scissors. The fever for extra long hair, driven by the unprecedented success of Totally Hair Barbie in 92, came to dictate Mattel's capillary aesthetic throughout the entire 90s decade. The impact was immediate and extended to several other doll lines. The appeal was direct, to explore the childhood obsession with combing, braiding, and even cutting the doll's hair. To meet this demand, Mattel took the concept to the limit, producing models with strands and lace that defied any notion of realism, but which expanded the potential for play and reinforced the trend. The search for increasingly long hair reached its peak in the mid-90s. In 95, the Barb Duo Hair Mermaid surpassed the Totally Hair mark, displaying strands that reached 12 inches in length, an unprecedented feat in the line. In 94, Barbie cutting style brought another innovative feature. She came accompanied by extensions attached by Velcro, which could be cut with scissors and reattached, allowing for the simulation of radical transformations without compromising the doll. The proposal responded a recurrent desire of children to try both cuts on Barbie's hair. In 1993, Hollywood Hair Barbie broke the decade's pattern by bringing back syrup. In an era marked by the almost exclusive use of Kanekalon, this decision had a technical justification. Only Saran allowed for the chemical treatment necessary for the strands to change color when applied with the spray included in the line. After the explosion in volume gained in the 90s, Kanekalon revealed its fragilities. The fiber ensured visual impact, but sacrificed perceived quality. That was when Mattel faced pressure from new competitors, especially Bratz, launched in the early 2000s, which arrived on the market with hair that was clearly softer, silkier, and more beautiful. The response couldn't be limited to quantity. The evolution of that period turned to the improvement of materials and the sophistication of hairstyles, in an attempt to recover the perception of quality and keep Barbie competitive in an increasingly demanding market. The Barbie Fashion Fever line, launched in mid-2004, marked a phase of refinement in the Barb's hair. After a decade dominated by Kanekalon, there was a consistent return to Saran in many editions. The classic fiber brought back the softness and durability that had been sacrificed in the 90s. The look of these dolls followed the tradition of extra long strands, but with a more sophisticated finish. Modern cuts, with voluminous side bangs and discreetly colored streaks in shades of pink or purple, reflected the pop rock trends of the early 2000s. It was an aesthetic update that sought to reconnect Barbie to the language of contemporary fashion without giving up the playful appeal of her hair. In 2009, the first generation of Barbie fashionistas signaled a turning point. The hair of these dolls anticipated changes that would define the next decade. The line presented dolls, each with a distinct style and name. This was a foreshadowing of the explosion of diversity that would occur in the following decade. There, one could already notice the emergence of more fantastical colors which were gaining acceptance in real fashion, being frequently seen on pop artists and in the emo style of the time. Although the Fashion Fever line had already introduced colored streaks, the Fashionistas line took this to a new level, with Barbies appearing with hair of diverse colors, without it necessarily being a fantasy edition. It was simply fashion. These releases served as a foreshadowing of the explosion of diversity that would mark the 2010s, when Barbie would come to reflect more intensely the plurality of styles and identities of the public. In 2010s, Barbie's capillary evolution was led by the Fashionistas line, which, starting in 2015, underwent radical transformations. Mattel expanded the collection's scope, introducing different bar types, skin tones, and an unprecedented variety of hair combinations. For the first time, dolls with kinky, curly, and voluminous afro hair appeared consistently, not just discrete waves. To achieve these textures, the company used synthetic fibers, especially Saran, subjected to perm processes that guaranteed the shape of the curls and the volume of the afro. Barbie also began to incorporate styles that were previously hair or non-existent in the main lineup, approaching the boldest fashion trends. In 2011, in the movie Barbie in the Pink Shoes, the character appeared with a shaved side, in the side cut style, highlighting how far the line had advanced in diversity. At the end of the decade, however, a cost decision affected perceived quality. In the lower budget play line, Mattel began to employ polypropylene. The fiber is the cheapest available, but also the most criticized. Its excessive shine, rigid texture, and easy untangling made it known among collectors as the worst fiber ever used in Barbie's hair. In 2020s, Mattel took steps that further expanded the reach of representativeness. In 2020, the Fashionistas line introduced the first bald Barbie, created to represent girls with alopecia or undergoing chemotherapy treatment. The launch marked an important advance by affirming that the doll's beauty could exist independently of hair. Soon after, Barbie Extra Deluxe resumed the tradition of extra long strands in a mood-colored version. But the impact was negative among collectors. The doll used polypropylene, a fiber considered inferior, described as impossible to comb and easily tangled. In parallel, there were important technical advancements. A historical limitation of Saran was the difficulty of holding fantasy colors. This obstacle was recently overcome. In 2024, mermaid dolls reached the market with hair in vibrant tones produced with Saran, demonstrating that the classic fiber remains versatile and capable of keeping up with contemporary aesthetic demands. The ponytail of 1959 was not just a hairstyle, it became a symbol so strong that it returned as a reference in Barbie, the 2023 movie, when Margot Robbie revived that first gesture of style. Between these two moments, a timeline of more than 6 decades is drawn, in which every fiber, every cut, and every color told not only the history of a doll, but also of a society in transformation. Today, Barbie no longer needs to fit into a single mold. She can wear her hair in an afro, in vibrant tones, or simply have no hair at all. From the rigidity of a single pattern to the freedom of infinite possibilities, Barbie continues to be a mirror of her time. And perhaps that is the greatest revolution, showing that beauty is not in the hair you see, but in the world reflected through it.